Paraskivadecatriophobia. Paraskivadecatriophobia. Paraskivadecatriophobia is the fear of Friday the 13th, coined by phobia and folklore expert Dr. Donald Dossi. The word combines the Greek terms for Friday, paraskivi, 13, triskaideka, and fear, phobos. The fear of the number 13 itself, triskaidekaphobia, long predates the specific anxiety around Friday the 13th. Obviously, today we're talking about Friday the 13th and the history of Friday the 13th tattoo specials. First, I'd like to take a quick moment to mention today's sponsor, which is me. Hi, I'm Gina, and I'm a tattooer in Portland, Oregon, and I love art and history, and I'm training to be an armchair historian. On the subject of today's video, I am, of course, participating in a Friday the 13th tattoo special. On Friday, February 13th, 2026, I'll be guest spotting at Lo and Behold Tattoo in my hometown of Olympia, Washington. So if you're in that area and want to get a Friday the 13th tattoo from me, hit me up. Meanwhile, my primary shop, the Black Hexagon in Portland, Oregon, will also be holding a Friday the 13th tattoo special. So if you're in Portland, Oregon, you should get a tattoo from them. And if you're watching this after February 2026, I do Friday the 13th specials pretty regularly, whenever there's a Friday the 13th. So just hit me up for the next one. Alright, now let's get into the lore of Friday the 13th. So the superstition goes way back, and it's actually kind of fascinating. So this might be a long video. Buckle up. We've got a lot of information to cover. A lot of ancient cultures regarded the number 12 as complete and harmonious. You'll see this everywhere in art and cosmology. 12 months of the year represented in medieval calendars, 12 zodiac signs illustrated in astrological manuscripts, the 12 Olympian gods depicted on Greek vases, the 12 tribes of Israel, and even early color systems built around 12 hues that later influenced art theory. 13, by contrast, breaks that symmetry. It disrupts the system, if you will. In visual language, imbalance often signals danger, chaos, or the unknown. So 13 then becomes the excess, kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Fun fact, in Germanic languages, 13 is the first compound number, where 11 and 12 still usually have their own unique names. For example, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I will list other Germanic languages that I can't pronounce out loud. Now let's look at legend and mythology. One of the most famous stories regarding bad omens and the number 13 is in Christianity. At the Last Supper, there are 13 people at the table, Jesus and his 12 apostles. Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, is the 13th to arrive. The following day, Friday, Jesus is crucified. Similarly, Norse mythology has a story of 13 guests that also brought despair. So Loki is the 13th uninvited guest to a banquet of the gods. And when he arrives, he tricks Hor into accidentally killing his brother Balder, the most beloved of the gods. This event plunges the whole pantheon into grief and despair, and eventually sets off the events that lead to Ragnarok, which is the cataclysmic war of the gods that ends the entire universe. For extra intrigue, Friday is named after Frigg, Balder's mother, who is consumed by anguish after his death. And in both stories, the 13th guest brings destruction to the dinner party, and the mother of a beloved figure is present when death strikes, which ties in the symbology of grief and devastation. By the Middle Ages, Friday itself had become associated with executions, penance, and mortality. And then we have one of the most infamous events tied to Friday the 13th. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of the Knights Templar. The Templars, Christian warrior monks who developed in one of the first international banking systems, were super highly respected by the Christian population. But King Phil was in a lot of debt with them and wanted to get him off of his back. So he had them imprisoned, tortured, and executed on made-up charges of hearsay, spitting on the cross, and engaging in illicit sexual acts. deaths in perverted, secretive ceremonies. Whew, that's a mouthful. It was a massive attack carried out simultaneously all over the country of France. Later engravings dramatized the scenes with flames, chains, and imagery of martyrdom. So this event tied to the bad luck of Friday the 13th is actually a modern idea. It was retroactively added to an already growing narrative of bad luck. Friday and the date of the 13th being combined as bad luck is actually pretty new from the Victorian era. By the way, the Knights Templar have nothing to do with Knights of the Round Table. I might have clicked on the wrong Knights link when I was researching everything, and I got really confused when Merlin came up. That was fun. I had to double check a lot of stuff. I think I lost a couple of hours of research that way. Whatever. But on that note, some legends say that the Round Table had 13 seats, 12 for the knights and 1 for either King Arthur or the Sage Perilous, an empty chair reserved for the knight destined to find the Holy Grail. But that's fictional, or is it? No, I'm just messing with you. Or am I? I don't know. But 13 isn't always negative. For example, the 13th tarot card in the major arcana is Death. And it is a very misunderstood card. Tarot cards aren't usually literal. They're layered with symbolism, which makes them useful tools for intuitive practices. And the death card almost never represents an actual death. Instead, it represents a transition, rebirth, a necessary ending that clears space for something new, like leaves falling in winter to make room for spring growth. So death, the 13th card, isn't a bad omen, it's transformation. We see this in Judaism as well, where a boy becomes a bar mitzvah at 13, marking the transition into religious adulthood. In numerology, 13 reduces to 4, which represents structure, rebuilding, and stability, often after destruction or a big change. Ancient Egyptians also viewed 13 positively. Some beliefs describe 12 stages leading to a 13th state of enlightenment or paradise. Some beliefs describe 12 phases of hell to travel through before you reach a 13th state of enlightenment in the afterlife. Many ancient cultures used a lunar calendar, which had 13 moon cycles. Some include the Mayan, Lakota, Cherokee, Babylonian, and Chinese ancient calendars. Because the lunar and solar cycles don't really align very neatly, systems like the Roman intercalary months emerged, eventually replaced by the Julian calendar in 45 BCE. So now we understand the significance of 13 and the bad omens attached to Friday, but the idea of Friday the 13th actually being unlucky is relatively modern. In 1834, the Marquis de Salvo wrote in Revue de Paris about a Sicilian count whose daughter was murdered on a Friday the 13th, declaring, "It's always Fridays and the number 13 that bring bad luck." This is likely the first publication linking Friday and the number 13. During the Victorian era, known for exploring the interests of death, omens, and the supernatural, this superstition flourished, and people really took onto it. People then retroactively cited historical events as proof, such as the Friday the 13th and the Knights Templar. Friday the 13th superstition and the superstitions regarding the number 13 even became so popular that there was a group founded to disprove the superstitions. The 13 Club, founded in New York City by Captain William Fowler. Members intentionally dined with 13 people, walked under ladders, opened umbrellas inside, and broke every superstition that they could. It included figures like future Presidents Grover Cleveland and Theodore Roosevelt. By the early 20th century, American newspapers openly referenced Friday the 13th as unlucky. Around the same time, tattooing, often talismanic and rebellious, began incorporating the number 13 into flash designs, paired with skulls, horseshoes, and other symbols of luck or unluck. And this is where we get to involve tattoo flash lineage. Artists like Cap Coleman and Sailor Jerry cemented traditional imagery: skulls, daggers, black hats, symbols that dared bad luck to try something. The number 13 fit perfectly. By mid-century, among sailors, bikers, circus performers, and working-class collectors, 13 became both a charm and a provocation. You didn't avoid bad luck, you challenged it and embraced it. By the late 70s and early 80s, Tattoo Flash leaned heavily into bad luck imagery, and it was especially boosted by the Friday the 13th film franchise debuting in 1980. In case you've been living on the moon for the last 46 years, Friday the 13th is a franchise surrounding a horror villain, Jason Voorhees, who slashes teens at Camp Crystal Lake. The mask in the Friday the 13th film franchise has now become more associated with Friday the 13th than it is to hockey at all. The 70s and 80s were a very, very, very good time for a lot of horror franchises to develop. Halloween was super popular, and then came Friday the 13th. It was followed by Nightmare on Elm Street. The success of these horror movies and these franchises really pushed horror aesthetic to the front line of the rebellious crowd. Eventually, as the Friday the 13th trend grew, getting a tattoo of the number 13th on a Friday the 13th wasn't unheard of. But it wasn't the popular tattoo holiday that we know of today either. The events we know of today as Friday the 13th tattoo specials were popularized in Dallas, Texas by Oliver Peck at Elm Street Tattoo. In the 1990s, as a gesture of gratitude towards the tattoo collecting community, he hosted a Friday the 13th event offering themed flash tattoos for $13. The designs were intentionally simple, fast and bold, direct descendants of the traditional flash principles. The affordability and novelty of the tattoo event caught on really, really quickly, and the events became legendary. Later on, in 2008, Peck would set a world record for the most tattoos performed in a 24-hour period during a Friday the 13th tattoo marathon. From there, Friday the 13th tattoos pretty much exploded. By the 2000s, shops across the US were hosting their own events, each developing unique flash sheets and offering heavily discounted rates. For some people, it's their first tattoo. It's small, quick, and affordable, and it's a really good introduction into the world of tattoo culture. For others, it can be just about the journey of collecting as many cool tattoo flash pieces as possible. Overall, I would give Friday the 13th tattoos 10 out of 10. I would definitely highly recommend participating in a Friday the 13th event. They're super fun, and you get to be a part of a legendary tradition in tattoo culture. And now that you know the history of Friday the 13th and the lore and superstitions and where they come from, even better, now you got a story to back up your tattoo. On Friday the 13th, bad luck never looked so good. Hey guys, Editor Me here. So after I finished recording and was about halfway through editing, I decided to hop on a tattoo forum and ask some of my colleagues what their thoughts of Friday the 13th tattoos were. And I got this comment that I really wanted to share and talk about a little bit. We don't do Friday the 13th tattoos on principle, so I can't be helped there. It's a gimmick to get people in the door that backfired and created cheap clients. Some who only show up for the cheapest tattoo possible. Why not just book a regular tattoo that day, or take a nap? I think the worst flash sheet I've ever seen was a 13th sheet done by an apprentice where I worked previously. It was a bad joke. Bad luck, you got a shitty tattoo by the apprentice. You should have known, and you should have gotten a good tattoo instead. So obviously, I don't agree with the sentiment at all. I understand where this person is coming from. So a lot of tattooers do avoid tattoo specials because one of the realities is that when you offer discounted tattoos, you tend to attract a percentage of people who really are only there because it's inexpensive. And that's a valid concern, and choosing not to participate in a tattoo special is completely within the tattooer's right. But to be fair, Friday the 13th tattoo specials didn't create cheap clients. And that doesn't only happen on Friday the 13th. There will always be people out there who only want the cheapest option possible. There will always be people out there who don't give a fuck who the artist is or about the quality of the work, as long as they can get a tattoo for as low of a cost possible. I mean, why do you think Ariel de Jesus is still in business? It's not talent. That said, my personal opinion about Friday the 13th tattoos is, as I already said, they're actually really fun. I'm not above participating in something playful for one day, and my job isn't to judge someone if they just want a tattoo that's cheap and I never see them again. In my experience, sometimes those clients who come in just for a novelty tattoo will look around, see the flash tattoos and designs on the walls, and book another appointment before they even leave. Sure, maybe for some tattooers it is about just packing the shop and making a quick buck, and maybe for some of the people getting those tattoos, they don't actually care about the tradition, they don't care about the artist, they don't care about the quality of the tattoo, they just want a cheap tattoo. But I think that's missing the point of it all. And that's just not really in the right spirit. As for myself, I'll be happy to check my ego at the door, and I'm gonna have a lot of fun this upcoming Friday the 13th. It's about celebrating the folklore and superstition that's captivated people for centuries. And it's super fun! I don't hate fun, I'm a fun times enthusiast. And I think if Captain William Fowler was alive today, he'd probably be pretty damn stoked to see how big the 13 Club has grown. Oh, and real quick, I highly suggest watching the number 13 Tattoo History. It's a mini documentary by Justin Wilson. I'll put the link in my description. It's a super fun watch. It's really informative. It's very well made, and I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot watching it, and you definitely will too. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the tattoo shop.